Well, it is a great joy to be with you together this morning. And I want to just echo the words that Mary shared with us earlier about choosing right now to just be open and curious. Because that's really part of the theme of what we're going to be talking about today. And, I want to invite you in the spirit of curiosity to just be aware as we talk about things, to think about sort of what gets in your way, what makes you uncomfortable in any given moment. And there's no right or wrong about that. Sort of the invitation is to just cultivate your awareness of it. Because the more that we can cultivate that awareness, the more we can do the first thing that is part of, I don't think we're a little ahead, but that's okay. I don't have the gizmo here. Anyway, the more we can be present. So this was just a great example, right in motion of a moment where I wasn't present because I was thinking about, where is the device to advance the slides? And all of the other things. And I don't know about you, do you ever notice that in the busyness of doing things, you're not really paying attention to whatever it is that's happening right now because you're thinking about all the other things that are coming up in the day. And wow, that person's got a great outfit on. And, I wish I looked as good when I wear black. And did I remember to write that down on the grocery list? Right? Our minds are so busy all the time. But what the invitation is today with this idea of being open and being curious is to become more aware of that spiritual dimension of your life, right? So that you can choose, and remember it's a choice, we'll talk more about that, but you can choose to live deeply in every moment, knowing your true divinity, and take that energy and that awareness into your life, into your action to protect the planet and all living beings, right? That is our invitation. So there's a story about Naropa, who was a Buddhist teacher, a yogi in the 11th century. And he met an older woman on the street one day, and she knew that he was one of the greatest Buddhist scholars in India, and she asked him if he understood the words in this large book that he was carrying. And he said yes, and she praised him and she laughed. Then she asked if he understood the meaning of the teachings in the book. And wanting to please her, he said yes, but she became enraged and called him a hypocrite and a liar. And that encounter changed his life because he knew he only understood the words, but not the teachings, not the meaning. Okay. Let's see. Oops, wrong. There we go. Okay. So, one of our foundational CSL principles is that we believe that heaven is within us and that we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. And I think this relates to the story that you just heard because there is what you know, the words, and then there's what you are conscious of, what you really deeply understand. And there's a big difference between those two things, as Naropa experienced in that story, and of course, as we all do in life all the time. I would say that I think in my own experience of life and getting older, I'm constantly brought to awareness of, I didn't really get that, did I? But now I have a new understanding. And how do I acquire that new understanding? Partly through my own reflective practice, but partly through my engagement with other people, because I learn lessons every single day from other people who bring to my attention something that I have overlooked or that I haven't had sort of sufficient understanding to really deeply take into myself. And that's sort of part of the pleasure, the wonder, sometimes the frustration about being a human being, right? It's a constant evolution. I don't know about you. Sometimes I wish I knew everything already, right? I didn't have to work. Do you ever feel that way? Yeah, you know? And it almost feels like, boy, is this some kind of divine joke to keep showing me what I haven't figured out yet? No, but there you go. So Pema Chodron, who's a Buddhist nun, says this. This is where we find ourselves. None of what we have learned seems very relevant when our lover leaves us, our child has a tantrum in the supermarket, when we're insulted by a colleague. How do we reconcile that frustration and humiliation with our longing, our deep, deep longing to be open and compassionate? And this is an interesting place to find oneself, for the practitioner is in an exceedingly important place. And I want to be clear, this is practitioner with a small p, which means everybody, right? We use that word practitioner here in our teaching in a particular way, and Mary and Sylvia are beautiful embodiments of practitioner as we use it, which is a prayer specialist. But this practitioner that she is referring to is everyone, because we are all the practitioners of our lives. And what this refers to is that moment, right, when you're realizing, oh, I'm caught up in the moment, in my feelings, in the events, but I'm not really able to be open. I'm not really able to be the compassionate being that is already within me, because remember, we don't learn, learning things like love and compassion is not finding something outside of ourselves. It's already in ourselves because it is part of our divine nature. But we don't live in a culture that really helps us connect with that super easily. Oops. And Ernest Holmes was very aware of this, and he shared with us these words. He said, in the end, did I put this down somewhere? Here it is. In the end, what living creatures want. Oh, didn't go the right way. Well, I apologize. Here we go. In the end, what living creatures want is love and belonging. Love overcomes both hate and fear. However, love does not overcome hate and fear through controversy or argument or force, but by a subtle power of transformation, transmutation, and sublimation. It is invisible in its essence, but apparent through its act. As light overcomes the darkness, the presence of heat causes the coolness of a room to change until it's warm and comfortable. So the radiant action of love and peace dissipates fear, hate, and confusion. What does that mean? It's a lot of words, isn't it? It's a whole lot of words. But I think what we can come down to thinking about is that light, right, or that heat or that warmth are like love and peace that is inside us. And when we can open up ourselves and get out of the way of its expression, everything is transformed around us, right? It is transmuted because those conditions external to us, of course, they are real in the sense that it is the life that we experience, but they aren't necessarily the truth. Because our teaching affirms that the truth is that divine wholeness of which love and compassion are a part. And that truth is already present. We are born as it moves in as and through us in every moment when we allow it to. And here's part of our challenge. We don't live in a culture that invites us from our infancy to do that, right? It's very focused on other things. So this is part of the work of that practitioner with a small p, is to become aware of that and then to make choices based on that. Holmes goes on to say, love overlooks the little differences that we have and finds a point of reconciliation with others. Love creates tolerance and human understanding, without which we become really divided against ourselves, and without which we almost unconsciously become filled with criticism, condemnation, and false judgment. Has anyone here ever experienced a moment of false judgment or criticizing others? Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'm glad to know I am not the only one. And again, it is part of our humanness to forget who we really are. And as we forget who we really are, we can sometimes forget who everybody else is, because everybody else, just like us, is that embodiment of the divine, right? But things get in the way. Our thoughts get in the way. No one can be happy or enjoy the greatest fulfillment in life until he has come to see that most people try to do the best they can, right? Everybody tries to do the best they can. And, sometimes that feels like it's working, and sometimes not so much, right? When we're able to reach out beyond the indifference and coldness of life, reach through all the intolerance and unkindness, only then do we meet that divine center, which is forever established in every person. And what I want you to think about in that phrase is this idea that it requires us to reach out, right? It requires us to make a choice, to make a conscious connection, to see that wholeness, to see that divine essence in each person. The last time I spoke here a month ago, I talked about choice. I talked about the importance of noticing where you are. And that's why we're talking today a little bit more about this idea of being present. Because when we are present, we notice more, and we notice that we have a choice, right? So mindfulness teaches the importance of staying in the present moment. And as we were talking, it's very easy to just live on autopilot, right? You wake up in the morning, you're thinking about what you need to do next. I've got to get ready to go to work. I've got to get dressed. Oh yeah, I've got to pick up the dry cleaner. Oh yeah, I've got to call mom. Oh yeah, I've got to do whatever it is. And we move through the entire day kind of just trying to accomplish our to-do list, trying to get everything done to do the best we can, right, in the world that we live in. But in order to participate in this idea of the transformation of the world, we must come from a place of love. And coming from the place of love requires stopping. It requires being mindful. It requires being mindful of ourselves and that love that is within us. And it requires us to be mindful of others. And sometimes that feels really hard to do. Yeah? It goes at once. Prentice Hemphill is a man who wrote, "This idea of welcoming love as a means of relating to ourselves and others is a challenge because it goes against all our training. There is a resistance to love in this culture that comes from the ways in which our culture as a whole puts us down or shames us, right, from being different, from wanting things that may be different, from having skills that may be different, from looking differently, right? There are all of these constant reminders that close us off from ourselves, and in so doing close us off from everybody else. And we find ourselves suddenly in this place where we're kind of running after less authentic versions of ourselves. Oh, in order to fit in here, I'm going to have to be quiet. I'm not going to speak out about X or Y or Z, right? In order to advance, I'd like to work here and get a promotion, but I have to toe the party line, right? Oh, in order to get along with my family, I better not talk about my belief that, it is important to care about everybody on the planet, not only those people who think just the way that we do. But this need to be right and see others as wrong really gets in our way. And part of what can begin to help us kind of move our way through that is this idea of mindfulness. So some of you may know the works of the Buddhist monk and writer Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Vietnamese monk. And he tells a story. When he was a young man in the monastery, he had a kitchen duty, which consisted of scrubbing pots and pans with coconut husks. And he would make a cup of tea for himself as a reward for doing this very boring, onerous task. And one day, the master of the monastery saw him and said, "Why are you scrubbing dishes?" And Thich Nhat Hanh said, "Well, it's my duty." but what is your motivation? I said, well, I think about the delicious tea that I'm going to enjoy when I am done. And the teacher laughed and said, you do dishes to drink tea? Better to do dishes, drink tea to drink tea. Right. So, on the surface, this is one of those stories, such a Buddhist kind of story, right? But you think, well, why should I be paying attention to doing the dishes, right? That's boring. That's onerous. I don't know about you, but I really don't. As a practice, I will fully own that most of my life I have not chosen to really be present in doing household chores. I don't know about you. But I'll tell you why it's important in a little bit. To get to love, right, to get into this flow, to get out of our own ways, we have to let go of an idea that sometimes seems counterintuitive, I think, which is the idea that the spiritual life is a journey with a destination, right? So that at some point we will be enlightened and we will never have to deal with the human conditions again. Wouldn't that be awesome? Except we have to accept that being fully divine does not mean not being fully human, right? That the only way to embrace others is to embrace our own humanity completely and without reservation. Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us that Siddhartha Gautama, right, the man who became the Buddha, the enlightenment did not stop him from being human. It says after his enlightenment, he was still a human being with all the suffering and afflictions that having a human body entails. He experienced all the feelings and conditions, pain, cold, hunger, discomfort, just like all of us. And we know this because he taught about it. He wrote about it, right? But the key point was that he chose to be aware of all of this as he experienced it. He used his suffering as a means of awakening. He knew how to make good use of his afflictions in order to experience that. And again, that's kind of a counterintuitive idea for us, isn't it? Affliction, I want to avoid affliction in all possible moments and ways. I don't want to be present with it. That doesn't sound fun, right? But is it useful? So, I don't know why I'm having so much trouble finding this today. All right, let's see if I go back the other way now. All right. You know that I really like sharing these principles and tenets with all of you. I'm always sticking them into my talks because I think they're an important part of bringing us together as community. Our foundational spiritual principles, the tenets of our global vision, are part of what we share in this teaching. And so from my point of view, the more we remember them together, the more we support each other in experiencing them in a more powerful way. So this is from our global vision. We see a world in which each and every person lives in alignment with their highest spiritual principle, emphasizing unity with God and connection with each other. A world in which individually and collectively we are called to a higher state of consciousness and action. And to me, this is exactly the reason why there is value in engaging our affliction. Because it is what allows us to connect with our deepest selves, but also with each other. Right? When we gloss over everything, there isn't any place or point of connection. But when we engage, to me, what happens is that once you get past that initial discomfort, you get into a more profound experience and understanding. Has anybody ever trained or done something physical, ride a bike for a long distance or walk a long way? There's a period where it feels kind of uncomfortable, right? It's hard, it feels uncomfortable, your body's complaining, why are you doing this, right? And then you reach a place where your body goes, oh, this isn't so bad. There's something good about this. Your body feels better, but also you're seeing things. You're in the moment. You are in the moment in your body. You're in the moment with whomever you are, or just with yourself or with others. But you had to go through that moment of discomfort to get there. And that's the same idea, I think, fundamentally with this idea of our spiritual experience. So understanding that we are fundamentally connected with everything else on the planet can be kind of overwhelming, don't you think? And yet at the same time, it can also spark this amazing sensation of love and desire to work together, to be in community, to create this world that works for everyone. We can give up trying to force the world to be some certain way and think about how we can together create something that allows us all to be the person that we are, all to be the divine that chose to show up as us. It's it really blows my mind sometimes when I think about how is it even possible that the divine can have so many guises? There are billions of people, and it's unique, and each one is unique. How incredible is that? Just as you look at our universe and all of the planets and stars and galaxy, and they're all unique. And there's more than we can really wrap our human minds around, right? Thich Nhat Hanh, you can see there's a thread here, a theme about Thich Nhat Hanh today, talked about thinking about human beings in a new way. He called it homo conscious. So, right, Homo sapiens is the designation for our species, right? So the idea is that we have a certain cognitive awareness, right? That's the sapiens part, right? But homo conscious is a greater consciousness, right? And he suggested that we can all contribute to creating that homo conscious, a species that embodies mindfulness, compassion, and enlightenment. With spiritual practice, we'll be able to adapt and survive. There needs to be a gentle revolution in all of us. I really love that you could have gentle and revolution in one phrase together, right? We usually think of revolution as something really intense and powerful and hard, but it doesn't have to be, does it? It can be something gentle. Once we've started that revolution, he suggests, it will bring radical change into our lives and our communities. So how do we start this? How do we do this? Well, we can start small and make some modest but powerful choices. And he came up with this idea of gathas, which are short verses to help us focus the mind on the moment at hand. And I'm going to share a couple of his and then one I came up with. Cleaning the bathroom. How wonderful it is to scrub and clean. Day by day, the heart and mind grow clearer. Here's another one. These are his. Recycling. In the garbage, I see a rose. In the rose, I see the garbage. Everything is in transformation. Even permanence is impermanent. Here's the one I came up with. Ironing. The iron glides, the steam rises. With every stroke, my heart opens wider. Wow. Now, if you lived with me, you would know I hate ironing. And that may be because my mom believed in the importance of always looking neat and presentable. So she had us start learning how to iron when I was about 4. And we not only ironed clothes, we had to iron sheets and pillowcases. And my husband will tell you that I still iron the pillowcases. But when I was thinking about this idea of being mindful about even the smallest things as a practice, as an opening, because we often think of spiritual practice as something kind of esoteric, right? Something that other people do. I don't have time to do spiritual practice. I'm busy. But if you're washing the dishes or taking out the recycling or ironing, you have, however long it took me to read those out loud, that's a spiritual practice that you can elect. And it's from those tiny beginnings, right, that we move into greater openings. And in that spirit of small beginnings, I wanted to share something that I'd been thinking about this week. As many of you know, I work as a palliative care chaplain at a hospital here in San Diego. And so every day that I'm working, I talk to people who are experiencing serious illness, some of whom are experiencing life-shortening illness and others not. You know, their illness is a season in their lives. But in any case, one of the questions that I often ask people is, what is bringing you joy in your life, right? And some people will tell me, nothing. What are you talking about, joy? You know, they are firmly in the throes of the difficulty they are experiencing in their bodies and their illness and all of the circumstances of their lives. But most people will tell me something else. Most people will tell me something that is very much about being mindfully in the moment. One person last week told me that what brings her joy is listening to birds. She sits in a chair outside in her backyard and she listens to birdsong. And that lifts her up in the moment. Another person told me that he loves to hear his children laugh, right? That uplifts him. Another person told me that it was holding hands with her husband. She described him as having magic hands because whenever he held her hand, she would feel comforted. Just that tactile sensation. And of course, we are creatures of our senses, aren't we? Right? These three examples. But so easy not to notice. How often do you think you're not noticing the songs of birds? A lot of the time, right? Or kids playing. Or even the things that you touch, or the people you're encountering. And yet, if we can take that moment to pause, that opens up a whole new dimension of our experience, whether it is with ourselves or with other people. So, Thich Nhat Hanh came up with his iteration of the 5 precepts of Buddhism, and this is his articulation of it. So he called them mindfulness trainings. And I'm just going to read a little bit about each one. Right? He saw them as a blueprint, both for personal spiritual practice, but also for creating a more just world. So the first is reverence for life. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I am committed to cultivating the insight of interbeing and compassion and learning ways to protect the lives of animals, people, plants, and minerals. Number 2, true happiness. Aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, and oppression, I'm committed to practicing generosity in my thinking and speaking and acting. True love. Aware of the suffering caused by misconduct, I am committed to cultivating responsibility and learning ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, families, and society. Number 4, loving speech and deep listening. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others. I am committed to cultivating loving speech and compassionate listening. And the last one, nourishment and healing. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption, I am committed to cultivating good health, both physical and mental, for myself and my society by practicing mindful eating, drinking, and consuming. So Victoria has some handouts. I have printed these out for you. And the invitation this week as spiritual practice is to choose one of these trainings and just to explore how you might engage with that, right? How can you expand yourself this week to explore it? There's no right or wrong here. It's part of our belief in spiritual practice that we can experiment with things, right? So see if there's something that resonates with you on that list, and think about exploring it, not from the standpoint of, can you find a moment where you can engage that, right? Nothing more complicated than the gathas that I shared with you, right? Whether it's something that you engage with, whichever one of these trainings that might speak to you. I'm not talking about homework that you have to put lots and lots of time into, but just to make a choice to be aware. So for example, if you were going to think about the loving speech and deep listening, can you take a moment this week to really listen to someone? Can you listen to someone who might seem really annoying for a minute? Do you ever encounter people like that? I do. And I'm sure that I am perceived by others to be annoying sometimes too. That my husband will completely admit, putting him on the spot here. But the point is that we always have a moment at some point in the day. And if we can begin to cultivate a practice of choosing moments, one moment might become 2, might become 3, might become 4, and so on. But we can't experience that until we start. So for every moment that you remember, yay, good job, no judgment. For every moment that you don't remember, no judgment. There's no opposite of yay. There's just, this is where the curiosity part comes in, right? Because as Mary shared in her meditation this morning, the invitation is to be curious. Okay, if you find it difficult to engage with whatever it is you chose, there's no bad about that. I want to be really clear in saying this is not a judgment exercise. There's simply an opportunity to be curious. Is there something that's getting in your way? And if there's something that's getting in your way that you find difficult to deal with, here's the great news. We have a whole bunch of ministers and practitioners here who can be present with you while you sort through what that is that might be getting in your way. Okay. So as we conclude our time together this morning, I want to invite you to join me in an affirmation. And it's this. So I'm going to invite you to stand up. And we're going to do it the way we'd like to do it here at Eckholm, right? The three different ways. So we will do it quietly, then we will speak it, and then we will shout it out to the world, okay? All right. I commit to being awake, alive, and aware in each moment. I commit to being awake, alive, and aware in each moment. I commit to being alive, and aware in each moment. Thank you. So it is. Thank you.